Hi all, welcome to this screencast on feedback. So it's on the methods in context question and the methods 10 marker at the end of the assessment that you have just sat. Mr. Evans has done feedback for his questions or for his section on the first part of that. My part was the 20 marker and the 10 at the end. I'm going to start with the methods in context and tell you some kind of general observations that I saw. Timing was a big problem. I know Mr. Evans mentioned that in his screencast, but I think a lot of people spent a lot of time on the first section, which then meant when you came to write the 20 marker and the 10 marker, some missed them out altogether, and some were just poor because they didn't have enough time. So it's really important that you literally be really strict with yourself. It's always the marks plus half. So for a 4 marker, you're going to spend 4 minutes plus half of that. So you're going to spend 6 minutes on that. The same as for a 20-minute marker, you're going to spend obviously half an hour on it. So you need to make sure that you're being really, really strict with yourself. Otherwise, you're going to run out of time for the whole thing. Intros were weak. For some reason, you forgot all about interpretivism and positivism. You forgot to, or a lot of people forgot to mention the context. Remember, it is a methods in context question. So that's quite important to have in the introduction. A lot of you also didn't put any explicit evaluation in. Remember, for 20 markers, if you're not explicitly evaluating, then you're stuck in not being able to get any higher than 12. So if you're stuck in the 10s, 11s, 12s out of 20, it's probably because you didn't put any explicit evaluation in it, or because it's not linked to the context at all. A good chunk of you wrote a 20 marker methods in context all on how good or how poor unstructured interviews were. Fine for a 20 marker on unstructured interviews, but you need to link it to the context, okay? So that was a lot of people's downfalls. Just that some people even managed to write the whole essay without mentioning ethnicity or even education at all. So we need to do some massive amount of work on that, because otherwise you're just going to be stuck getting those half marks, and you need to be, we want you obviously better than that. What was really good though is a lot of them were conceptually detailed. So you had validity, Hawthorne effect, you had reliability, generalizability, you talked about interpretivism, positivism in the kind of main body, qualitative, quantitative, so that was really good. And also a lot of you didn't forget the item, which was really good, so there was a lot of good item use there too. That said, it could be more, okay? Remember, the first bit on an item is always about the context, so we've got this part always being about the context, and then this part will give you information about the method. I've highlighted things on here that I expect you to be able to pick out from that item. It's always worth doing this right at the beginning of the question so that you've got something to kind of hook onto. I also, and I can't do this obviously on PowerPoint, but usually we put this on the board and we actually annotate this with different things that we can actually talk about when looking at that. So I've got pupils from some ethnic groups achieve very highly on average. You'll be thinking, or that should be pulling out to you, like female Chinese students, for example. Then you've got other groups often less successful. That should be kind of screaming at you. Black Afro-Caribbean, Pakistani, Bangladeshi. Then I've got pupils have different experiences at school. Some may have obviously a really positive experience, some not. And then we've got factors connected to home I've missed a bit. Different experiences within school. So one, you've got different experiences anyway, and then it's pulling out within school. So you should be thinking about factors that affect different ethnicities' achievement within school, but then also home background. So within school, you've got labelling and teacher racism, for example. Home backgrounds, you've got some ethnicities tend to be obviously working class, so you'll have lots to do with obviously income, poor housing, poor nutrition, etc. You might also want to bring in parents there as well. Moving on to the method part, it's given you that it's easy for an interviewer and interviewee to check that they understand each other. When I read that, instantly to me, I thought, language barrier. I'm talking about ethnicity. Unstructured interviews are good because I got that interviewer there to clarify meaning. I'm talking about ethnicity, so different ethnicities might have a language barrier. I've said already about them, perhaps some being working class, so then you can bring in Bernstein, restricted code, etc. Opportunity to speak about things that are important to them. Maybe some of these pupils may not have been listened to before, so that's really important. And then you've got, however, interviews require good interpersonal skills in order to conduct a successful interview. Now that to me is screaming out practical, it's screaming out personal skills, it's screaming out timing and cost to train up these interviewers. Okay, so that's instantly pulling out a weakness to me. Now, introductions I said were quite weak. This is what I want you to put in introductions in methods in context. What is the method? So tell me about it. Unstructured interviews, okay? You know, is it primary? Is it secondary? Is it quantitative? Is it qualitative? What actually is the method, okay? What theoretical perspective is it and why? And tell me something about the context. So I've given you this here. By all means, please pause this to read it yourself. But I've highlighted the different parts that I've spoken about. So what is the methods in purple? So I've explained here what the method is. Blue, I've talked about it being favoured by interpretivists and why, because of the depth, the qualitative data, the Verstehen that it provides. And then my yellow bit is about my context, where I've also linked to the item. Now, I haven't quoted it, because it doesn't exactly say it. So I've used the word implied by the item. Some ethnicities, such as Chinese, are extremely well in education. Others, such as Pakistani students, tend to be less successful. Okay, so because the item doesn't explicitly say that, I can't quote it, so therefore I can't say stated. But by all means, put this on pause and have a little read through. It might be worth kind of comparing to your one as well. Just put something over there so it wasn't a massive kind of display of information. What I'm going to do now is talk you through some of the points that you could have made, how to explain it, how to link to your context, and that explicit evaluation. Like I said, the link to the context and the explicit evaluation were really poor, okay? Points were good. You could make fantastic points about unstructured interviews, so you've done your revision on that, which was brilliant. But that's not really going to help you in this situation because the key is to link it to that context, okay? So I've picked out some common points, strengths and weaknesses. I've explained it, linked it to the context, and then given you some explicit evaluation and an item link if possible. You're not going to be able to link every single paragraph to the item, and that's fine, but where you can, please make sure you are doing it. We've already linked it in our introduction on the previous slide, so that's one already. Always try and do that because instantly the examiner will be like, right, once they've linked to that item. So, my first weakness, it takes a long period of time to conduct. I'm explaining it. Students may struggle to stick to the point in interviews. They may pay attention to small details which will take them off into a different path. Okay, now I'm already linking it there to education already. I'm talking about students, okay, and that they have really kind of lacking focus maybe. Linking it to my context, so I want to take it further. So your interviewees are students. Loads of people in their essays kept saying the interviewer and the interviewee. And I had to keep saying, you know who your interviewee is. You've been told it's a student of a different ethnic background. So link to your context, you'll have to take them out of class. No telling how long this interview will go on. They're obviously missing valuable lesson time. You are altering their achievement, okay? You are interviewing them on their achievement, but actually because your weakness is that unstructured interviews take such a long time to conduct because some students struggle to stick to the point, you're going to have to remove them from the classroom, okay? And the whole thing is that you're looking at achievement, but actually you're making them miss valuable lesson time. My explicit evaluation, however, children also often have better verbal skills than they do literacy. So doing this unstructured interview is going to be better than any other method where they perhaps have to write down when looking at this context, okay? So you can see I've explained my point, I've linked it to my context, there's no item link really that I found that fitted perfectly, and then I've explicitly evaluated. Another strength, the researcher can clarify questions and answers. Okay, brilliant. Loads of you picked that out. Unstructured interviews are not restricted to standardized questions, so they allow the researcher to pause and check the interviewee understands what they're asking. You're linked to your context. Bring in what you know about ethnicities, okay? Bring in everything that you did with Mr. Evans on education and ethnicity. You're going to want to be talking about a language barrier, okay? Of course, unstructured interviews are going to be brilliant here because the interviewer can check that actually that person, that student, understands the question that they're asking. They might also say something and the researcher doesn't quite understand, so they can clarify that. Also, some ethnicities such as Black Afro-Caribbean or Bangladeshi students tend to be working class, so you're going to need to talk about the restricted code and the elaborated code. The researcher is going to have that elaborated code, the student's going to have restricted, so explain that. You're going to bring in Bernstein, okay? Here's a chance to show off your knowledge here. Talk about all those sociologists, bring in names, okay? There are a couple of people that did that, which was absolutely fantastic, and that's what made them jump into that high band, okay? Interviewee and interviewer can check they understand each other's meaning. That's my item link. And then my explicit evaluation is that although that researcher might be really useful, it can lead to that status and power imbalance, which can then reduce the rapport. And alternatively, they may be the researcher as a teacher in disguise, so maybe less honest in expressing what's affecting their attainment or their achievement. Put that on pause, read it through for yourself, and I'm going to kind of carry on. So another strength, that they're extremely flexible. There's no set standardized questions, meaning that a number of areas can be considered. My link to my context is that obviously different students are going to have varying degrees of success. There's going to be a number of reasons for this. Chinese parents tend to hold education system in high regard, so they're likely to push their children, whilst others, such as Bangladeshi children, they tend to be working class. They might be working 2 jobs, so are unable to ensure their child is working hard. I'm linking it to my item. I'm not quoting because, again, it doesn't exactly say what I want it to say, but it is implied. So my item link there is that many factors contribute to achieving or not achieving, so home and in-school factors. Obviously, you can change that round to illustrate kind of what you are wanting to say there. And then your explicit evaluation, because they're so flexible and there's no standardization, they lack reliability, meaning that you can't reproduce them. That then hinders their generalizability and prevents sociologists from being able to draw patterns and trends for why some ethnicity do better than others. Another weakness is access. Okay, so you're researching children, you obviously need permission from the school if you're doing it on school premises, and also the parents. My link to context here, I've mainly stuck to my access issue with schools. I haven't mentioned gatekeeper, but that would be a brilliant key term to add in there. So one reason why some ethnicities do better than others might be because of teacher labelling and racism. Black and Asian pupils are far from the ideal pupil. Black are seen as disruptive, Asian are seen as passive, okay? So instantly there, I've got that key term, teacher labelling. You might have wanted to add in Becca there. I'm talking about the ideal pupil here. That's a really important key concept. I've got Gilborn and Yodel down here talking about racialised expectations, leading to higher rates of exclusions for Black students. So all of these are going to affect achievement rates, and also the school's not going to let you in case you actually find racism in their school. That's going to be a huge issue if you then obviously go on to publish your research. And then I've linked that to my item, pupils have different experiences in schools. No explicit evaluation there. You don't need explicit evaluation for every paragraph, but everyone that I've spoken about so far, I've got obviously the 2 here, I've got 1 there, not on that one, but then on my final one I've got it back again. So my final strength I want to talk about is that you can build a rapport. They're conversational, you can ask off-topic questions to relax interviewee, you can talk about interpretivism here and then Verstehen. A big chunk here, okay, I'll just summarise, you can pause it and read it in your own time if needs be. Obviously, achievement's a really sensitive topic. Loads of you mentioned about building a rapport, which is brilliant. Loads of you mentioned about it as a sensitive topic, but you didn't say why, okay? You just left it as this is good for looking at sensitive topics. Okay, you know the topic you're looking at. So students might be having a hard time if they're doing badly. A reason might be something to do with home, such as poor housing, limited space, might be damp, they're going to get ill, this is going to be embarrassing. If you build up a good rapport, students are going to be able to talk at ease with you, they'll be more forthcoming. Their answers might be more honest, so this gets rid of, that's not meant to say the Hawthorne effect, sorry. This gets rid of the halo effect. Okay. And then I'm defining what that is, and then it's going to lead to more valid data. I've got loads of key terms in there, okay? I've got my halo effect, I've got my valid data, I've got the idea of them being sensitive topics, okay? I'm linking to the item, but this is going to link in with my explicit evaluation. So I'm putting, however, practical issue, it requires a lot of researcher skills and characteristics, can cost a lot of time and take a long time to train. I'm talking about obviously training your interviewees to be able to have the skills to build up that rapport in the first place. And then I've linked into my item, it requires good interpersonal skills. So that's kind of 5 paragraphs for you to include there. So I've got one weakness, but then backed it up with perhaps a strength. I then got another strength, backed it up with my explicit weakness. I've got a third strength here, and then a weakness there, so that's 4 paragraphs, and then I've got a final strength, that's 5th. Now I want you to aim to write 4 or 5 well-peeled paragraphs. A lot of you did that, but they weren't actually peeled and they weren't linked to the context, okay? So that context is really, really key. What I suggest you do is actually put me on pause and improve on one of your paragraphs, and I'd actually like that sent to me, please, to show me that you are actually using this feedback, and I'll put that obviously on Go for Schools so we can chat about that. You can pause me, but this is what a lot of people kind of did in the exam. Obviously these are not identifiable from these, but you might read this and think, oh my gosh, I did that. So these are just random paragraphs picked out from different students' answers that weren't so great at mentioning the context. All of these don't talk about the context at all, and they're from 3 different answers. So put me on pause, have a read. I'm not going to read them out to you. Ones mentioned that were fantastic, same thing again, put me on pause, have a read. You can see Chinese and Indian already there. You've got someone talking here about the ethnocentric curriculum, okay? Put me on pause, have a read. And then, this person here, this was their intro. So I just wanted to pull out a really, really fantastic intro straight away. And then we've got one from the main body. This one, although it's long, was absolutely fantastic. We're talking about Black families here. We're talking about ethnic minority groups. We're talking about it being a sensitive subject. You know, there's loads of great things there. We've got Monaghan there. So they're bringing in sociologists from ethnicity and education. So what I want you to do, pause this, and I want you to actually take one of your paragraphs that where I've put it's not linked to the item, and I want you to actually redo that. If you're watching this before Monday's lesson, obviously don't do that kind of now because you won't have got your feedback individually from me. But if you're watching this after Monday's lesson or on Monday's lesson, then obviously please do that. There's some useful revision videos to watch there from this brilliant teacher that kind of talks you through examples that you can use. So please make use of that, they're really good. Okay, so let's move on to our feedback on our outline and explain 10-mark question. Obviously this was your answer, outline and explain 2 disadvantages of using personal documents in sociological research. If you were really good and you actually did lessons that I set and you used the screencast for revision, you would have seen that I did a whole screencast on this question. And it was quite clear the people that had not even looked at that and the people that obviously had. So when I do kind of set things to obviously help you, please make sure you use it because that's going to benefit you obviously in the long run. Now, your points were fantastic for this. Brilliant points, couldn't fault them. They were really good, but they did lack in depth and explanation, okay? Also, examples. I spent the whole time telling you to use examples in research or real life examples that had used this method. They were missing in loads of people's, okay? Some of you did really well, and obviously you'll see when you get your feedback back where you've kind of done well and where you haven't. I think a lot of this was to do with timing. Obviously, this was the last question. So if you'd spent a long time on the first section, you left yourself with no time to write this. And then obviously the length ties in with the timing and the lacking in depth and explanation. Here's the mark scheme. The majority of people fell into this band, with a lot of people falling into the 4, 5, 6 mark. I think there was only 2 people, I don't know, 2 to 4 people that actually got into this band. But you can pause this and have a read through whenever you kind of want to. Now, these are the points. I said that your points were brilliant, but if you struggle to think of points, these were obviously the points that you could have spoken about. Difficult to access or locate, manipulation, or doctoring of documents, fragmented or limited in scope, analysis in time is time consuming, practical difficulties, might not fit the researcher's brief, difficulties to in establishing representativeness and generalizability, and difficulties in ensuring authenticity, okay? Remember those examples, okay? You've got examples down here. The ones that I think, or the one that I think that you would have definitely heard about is Aries, okay? Anderson and Atkinson you'll hear about in year 13 when you do crime. They look at suicide. But you could have certainly mentioned Aries. You've got personal documents, or obviously their letters, their diaries, their artwork, their autobiographies, okay? Some of you just wrote generally about documents, which I couldn't give you the marks for because they're not personal. I think loads of you in your revision had kind of had a look at maybe model answers, but didn't realise that the answers were for documents as opposed to personal documents. So I saw a lot of people talking about private organisations creating these documents. Private organisations are not going to create them because they're personal documents, okay? So examples, like I said, their letters, their diaries, their suicide notes, their autobiographies, their artwork, for example. Any of those you can use as obviously examples to help you out. I've just given you kind of a model here. Loads of you mentioned PET, which was really good, so I've put practical disadvantage in here. But you can kind of read this at your own leisure. Put me on pause. I've used the example of Anne Frank's diary about the Holocaust. Like I said, it doesn't necessarily have to be sociological, but you could use Aries paintings. That would be a personal document. But I want you to pause that and then obviously have a read of this. My main issue was just the lack of depth, okay? Most people just literally wrote half of this. Obviously, this is just one paragraph, but some people's whole answer was less than this slide, okay? So please be really wary of what you're writing. That's why you would have fallen in the 4 out of the 10 mark, because there just wasn't the depth, there wasn't the analysis, there wasn't the examples, there wasn't the links that I needed to give you those kind of top band marks. Now I hope that helps some of you. I'm going to be doing a Teams for both groups, or for both the groups that I teach, but I'll have to kind of email you all separately about that, because I need to do it class by class, if that makes sense. So please keep an eye out on your emails for a link for Teams. If you haven't got it already, download it, but in my email I'll tell you how to download it. And then maybe we can have some face-to-face interaction about this, and you can ask me any specific questions. Your individual, Mr. Evans is going to send out your, if you're taught by me and Mr. Evans is sending you out your individual, obviously grades and question breakdown. And then you'll also get back your papers from me. I've put comments on it. So they'll be coming probably at the beginning of next week, because that's when we have a next lesson. So I'll get those out to you as soon as I can. Okay, please email me if you've got any questions. Obviously, it would be lovely to see you on Teams when I set that up, and we can have kind of a video call. You can join and go whenever. I'll be on for about an hour, so you can pop in, ask a question. If you didn't agree with that comment or you want some help with a specific paragraph, then obviously that's how we're going to get through that. Well done for getting them in on time. Just please pay attention, especially with the Mick question about what I've suggested. Thanks for listening. Any questions, just email me.